Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we sat down with former music executive and nonprofit founder of Silence is Shame Incorporated, Shanti discussing her early days at LaFace with Outkast, dealing with grief and loss while staying encouraged, and redefining her purpose over the years through community and service. Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and today I'm sitting down with someone we've been trying to secure for the longest. You may know her as a music industry veteran, former executive, as well as founder of all of the things, the Hip Hop Professional, all of your philanthropic ventures that we'll discuss underneath that brand. Shanti Das, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. So what's going on? You just celebrated your birthday. First off, happy birthday.
I did. Thank you. It was, I think a lot of people that follow me on social media, they know I'm really open and honest about like my feelings and, you know, what I'm going through that day. And so this whole year has been tough for me losing my sister. And, you know, they always say like the first year of everything, you know, if you were really close to someone, when you lose that loved one, like everything that happens the first year is going to be hard.
So
I woke up all in my feelings on my birthday.
Yeah.
But it got better.
Yeah.
Because of the work that I do, I know what I need to do. I know my triggers. And so I push myself to kind of get up and out and get some self-care. So went and got my hair done and did a massage. So it got better. Thanks for asking.
Good. Of course. For sure. Yeah. I know, obviously, you just mentioned it, and I saw on Sister Circle where you were talking about losing your sister literally a couple of weeks before.
Yeah,
having
that was
to
very
appear.
fresh.
How do you, and we'll talk about this through, you know, what you've done with Silence is Shame and, like, your mental health awareness platform, but how do you continue to move? I'm just curious to know because, like, I've dealt with a lot of loss just over the years, too. How do you move when you have to, you know, you've already made that commitment to do something, but something like a tragic loss or a loss happens to you, especially with someone so close to you?
It's difficult. I'll be honest with you. Even like earlier this morning, I was like, do I even really feel like sitting in front of somebody and talking and pouring out? Because I felt a little empty this morning. And it was when I came to the realization, because I've been looking to get a new therapist. I just changed insurances. And so I was like, that's the first thing I need to do is stop procrastinating and go ahead and complete the process. Because I had found someone I wanted to use, but I had been looking for some other people maybe closer to where I live. And so it's all faith and spirituality. Because right now I'm not on any antidepressants or anything, which I'm not opposed to doing again if I need to. But
Why did you stop?
Well, so that was, 2015, almost 5 years ago when I had the suicidal ideation, and I felt like I was feeling better, and it did help. And so probably about after somewhere between 4 and 6 months, I kind of, you know, got off of them because I felt like I was doing much better, and I was exercising and doing other things that I knew would help my mental health and wellness. And so when my sister passed away, I only went to grief support group counseling. I didn't do therapy as much. I didn't go see a psychiatrist to even possibly get back on medication. But once I started seeing a new therapist, if I feel like I need it, I'm definitely open to it. Because I can like hear my sister going, you need to do, do X,
she was
Y,
actually
Z.
the one who
helped
you.
Through my really tough time. And even when our dad took his own life, she stepped right in as a child, essentially. She was only like 8.5 when it happened. But
Really?
she helped to raise us. And she started going to counseling when she was in college because she had a lot that she had never dealt with. And I don't know who, you know, encouraged her, but she had the wherewithal to do it. And it really helped her. And even in like recent years, you know, she would tell me that she was on antidepressants and it helped her a lot just from a lot of things. And we also have another family member that suffers from a more severe mental illness. And so through all of that, she was like, I don't know what you're doing. She's like, you really need to consider it. And so I'm at that point now where, yes, my faith helps me a lot and pushes me. And I try to surround myself with like positivity. And I still listen to hip hop. I still like R&B and jazz, but a lot of times I'll just put on like a spiritual or faith-based channel when I'm riding in the car because it just helps me kind of center my thoughts and keeps me going. But I definitely know that I need more than that, because I got a lot on my plate running this organization. Because running a nonprofit is still essentially running a business, which not a lot of people realize. You still got to do payroll, you got to deal with insurance and so much other stuff. And
I imagine it would be a little bit more challenging too, because there's so many like pockets of things that you probably didn't even know about.
Oh my gosh, it really is. Like yesterday, I was in a training from 9 to 3, taking this class for. It was a financial class for non-financial people, which would be me because I'm more creative. But, just kind of pushing and doing that work and trying to find people to support the movement, trying to bring in funding, which is hard. It's a little bit easier if I was an entrepreneur and, needed to do a round of investments with angel investors. But, people will give to a cause, but there has to be some level of connectivity there.
Absolutely.
And so I'm still trying to push to find those high net worth individuals that want to support our mission. But until then, the grind is real. I tell people I feel like it's like breaking Outcast again. This is my baby, and I'm finding new ways. And so so I through the faith and through just I think some internal grit. It wasn't easy being a woman growing up in the music industry, specifically working in hip hop. And so there were times where I just had to encourage myself and I had to push myself. And so I find myself. It's not like I'm talking to myself. It's just I'm encouraging myself. It's like those daily mantras like, okay, you just got to do it, and I'm constantly just telling myself, you got to do it, even with from a wellness perspective. It's like you got to get up, get out, and get something.
Come on.
CeeLo and them said back in the day. So I
push
myself, to get up. On my birthday, I was like, get out the house, because I know one of my triggers is when I'm by myself, and isolation isn't good, when you're in your thoughts and feelings. And so you got to get moving, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is for me very special because, like, as you said, where you were coming up in the business, like it was one of you. You didn't really see a lot of people that looked like you, that were women in this space, especially doing all the amazing like boss things that you were able to do.
Thank you.
So shout out to you on that. But like now you can see like way more like. During Grammy Week, they do the Instagram Women's Brunch, and like there's so many women in music who are killing it.
Yes.
It's a different space, but like you saying that was a difficult time for you, or like I'm curious as to like why you feel, or like how you even feel now seeing the difference and like that evolution, like you being a person who made way for us.
So one, I'm very excited about what's going on right now. To your point of seeing all the women that's being celebrated through, whether it's the luncheon, during Grammy Week, and, Billboard has the Women in Music issue that they do. Some of my mentees are doing great. Ethiopia was she shadowed me as an intern a couple times when she was at Mays, which is our alma mater. So I'm so proud of her. Felicia Fant, who is one of my mentees, is now killing it, co-president of Black Music at Columbia, and she has her PR firm. And so many other, Tracy Adams at Epic. I mean, I could keep going on, and, Rachel, who's now over at Google. Like, I love these ladies, and I'm super proud that the opportunities are there, even more so when I was coming up. And so I did have some women that really supported me when I was coming up, but I also, there were tough times where I felt like I was getting hated on by other women.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to that specifically because I hear a lot of times, or often because I don't have that, like a lot of we embrace each other.
Yeah.
Whereas then it was like, it wasn't that much embracing it. Everybody was just trying to get it.
Yeah, they were, and listen, I don't call names. I don't have any bad blood with people, but it was some difficult times where people were fending for themselves and looking for that opportunity, that next promotion. There were a couple of times where I felt like, people within my own department were hating on me on the slide. And it's probably because they wanted more and more opportunities. But so it was kind of like every man for himself. And so thank God that, I had a certain work ethic, and the people that I reported to saw that, right? And I guess they respected that. And that's why I was rewarded for my work. And I did have, I think there was a period of time when I was in the game that I had more male mentors than female mentors. But I'm grateful that there were people like, Dee Dee Murray, who, is Peaches on the Outkast Southern Playlistic album, gave me my first shot. She was there for me. Also, my dear friend Sherry Riley, who did marketing at LaFace and went on to become, a successful entrepreneur and now life coach. Like, she was there for me during tough times. And Vivian Scott, too, who is really started in like the late 80s, early 90s, and Karen Masons of the world. Like they were people that I could look up to even if I didn't directly talk to them on a regular basis. So being able to see women like that and just know that there were some good women out there kind of kept me going. But those times that I felt like I did get knocked down, I was disappointed, right? Because I just feel like it's enough opportunities out there for women. Let me say, there may not be enough out there, especially at the time, but I felt like if you were working hard, right, and you had some good people surrounding you, then hopefully, there would be some opportunities for growth.
Right.
But I also at the same time feel like what's for you is for you.
Always.
And we don't always see that, right? Mm-hmm. And we didn't have social media back then, so it wasn't as in your face in terms of how well people were doing. But, I don't know, it was just the hate was real at one time. And then you had the East Coast, West Coast stuff. So it was just a lot of beef and a lot of craziness going on in the game. But it was also a good time in hip hop. It was a time for opportunity. I think especially being from Atlanta, we always showed love to like the East Coast, the West Coast, Miami, whatever the sound was. And so it was nice that you had artists like Outkast and Goody Mob kind of evolve and give the South like a signature sound. Also shout out to Dallas, Austin, and Jermaine, who really set the way, whether it was with Criss Cross or Another Bad Creation, and they kind of opened up the doors for us. But then Outkast really solidified, I think, the Southern sound.
Talk about how you were a pivotal part in that you were at LaFace. Mm-hmm. Like, first off, I didn't know until researching that was like your first like gig coming out of school. You went to Syracuse, for those that don't know. Yep. So having that New York experience, we can go on and on about how that shaped you, because eventually you moved back. But coming to Atlanta at LaFace, doing promotions, or the national director of promotions, let me be specific, and like working directly with someone like Babyface or L.A. Reid. Like, obviously, those listening know those names are like big wigs in the business. So to have that be your first job, and then to be breaking this like really unusual group for music at the time, how was that? How difficult was that? And why did you feel like it was so important for you to be a part of that project?
Let me just rewind really quickly. Sure. Interestingly enough, my first quote-unquote internship / gig was at Capitol Records the summer of my sophomore year and the summer of my junior year
of college,
while I was still at Syracuse. So Dee Dee that I mentioned, who was Peaches on the Outkast album, she was going on maternity leave. And she was pregnant with her daughter, Malia, who I love and is doing so well with LVRN. I literally have known her since she was in her mom's womb. But her mom gave me that shot, and I ended up getting paid. So technically, it was like having a job. And so I helped out in the promotions department at Capitol Records. And so it was, Dee Dee, who had connected me with Keith Fry, who was our boss. And then Keith Fry ended up leaving Capitol and started consulting with LaFace. So that's how I got the interview right out of college. And it's all, I still tell people to this day, even in 2020, it's a lot about who you know. You got to know your stuff, but you also got to network, right? And get out there and put yourself in front of people and find those opportunities. So stayed in touch with Keith, and that's how I got hired 4 months out of graduation from Syracuse as National Promotions Director, making, I'll never forget, $30,000. I thought I was rich.
Look.
You couldn't tell me anything. And so it was cool, too, because most people coming out of college, you get like the assistant gig, right, or an administration role. But LA, I think hip hop was new territory for LA and Babyface because they were these mega super producers and R&B producers that kind of turned pop. And so hip hop was like uncharted waters for them. And he was like, we just need somebody, in this space that can work these records. And so the first single that I officially worked was Players Ball from Outkast, which interestingly enough, and I'm a lot of people know this story, it was off of the Christmas album. But it started getting on this buzz, and so they went back in the studio and kind of changed up the lyrics so it wasn't as Christmassy. But it wasn't even a traditional Christmas song anyway.
Yeah.
And so, we got 12 inches made, and that was my gig. I had to go to all the clubs, the strip clubs, everything in Atlanta, passing out cassettes and 12 inches. And then the next year, Freaknik happened, and we literally we rented a van and we put like these LaFace signs on the side because it was before like a lot of rap vehicles was even in the market. And I slapped those LaFace signs, and we just got lost on I-75, 85, and it was a parking lot. And I'll never forget, it was so funny. We just got out of the van and started running up and down the highway, passing out these Outkast cassettes. And to this day, when I see Too Short, he'll always, if we're around people, he'll be like, yo, she was the first one that gave me this Outkast cassette and was like, yo, you need to know these boys. They going to be the next, big thing. And surely it happened.
That's
and
crazy.
We definitely attribute a lot to that weekend that we further solidified Outkast during Freaknik with a lot of people that came in from out of town.
Wow.
It was dope.
That sounds...
I wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, I probably worked sometimes 18 to 20-hour days, because I'd be in the office because I had to do the paperwork and getting T-shirts made, getting flyers created and all that stuff, all the creative stuff. And then, it was time to either take a DJ to dinner or go do something, and then you had to go to the studio, and then after studio went to the club, and you get up and do it all over again.
Yeah, I was just saying, sounds like you were involved in a lot of everything, every facet of that
It
creation.
was really dope. Yeah. And then LA, even though I did promotions, LA allowed me to attend his A&R meetings, which if anybody remembers back in the day, it was like the holy grail of meetings. Like his A&R meeting was a really big deal. And so at first, when I first got invited in, I'm sure the people in the department was like, what's she doing in here? But LA said he thought I had a good ear. And so he allowed me to attend. And I learned a lot. I was able to contribute. But yeah, we had a dope squad.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you too. Just being able to work around all of those people, what sorts of things, or how even did those experiences shape what you're doing now? To learn how to have such business acumen or to be able to lean on these relationships when you're looking for funding, et cetera.
So it's interesting you say that. I was just talking to a friend about that not too long ago. Not that we didn't think we were better than anyone. We just did things differently. One thing I can say about L.A. Reid and a lot of our senior team members at the time, they instilled this level of greatness in us that, we didn't settle for mediocrity. Even the level of professionalism was different. If you call the office, you would get a call back. Or either if you came up there, people wouldn't just leave you hanging. They would at least tell you something.
Right.
I just feel like nowadays there's a lack of professionalism with some of our young adults, and it's really disheartening. And I don't know if that's because of social media or just a sense of entitlement. Everything's so easy. You literally don't have to go to the grocery store anymore and go shopping. You can get packages delivered the very next day. It's we as a people and a culture, it's we're getting too
convenient.
We're getting too comfortable with life. And it's there's still something to say for getting up, getting out of the house, and going to have to make deals happen. And even I still like going to the grocery store and picking my own stuff, and even shopping. I like to hold something in my hand, being able to have things that are tangible. And so working at LaFace, and granted, we made a lot of money back then. The business, money was different. So if, for example, a video wasn't right and it was a superstar artist, LA was like, we can't put it out there like that. It's whack. Go back to the drawing board. And, again, it wasn't like we were wasting money. We, if you do the math, we had enough money coming in so that we could, put more money and more marketing dollars and still end up making a profit, right? So it wasn't like he was just blowing money, wasting money 24/7. But again, that he had raised the bar of excellence so high that when you saw a video, or our artists out, there was just a certain level of excellence that the public knew was going to be there. Even in our meetings and our creative meetings, we would spend hours and we were brutally honest. If something was whack, we would tell you it was whack. I remember standing on the tables in meetings. I was talking to DJ Eddie F when, LA and Babyface just got honored recently in Atlanta from YouTube. It was like a family reunion. Everybody was there and got to see producer and DJ Eddie F. And we were laughing. He was like, yo, you used to go so hard. I remember you standing up on the tables because you didn't agree with something. I literally stood up and was like, this shit is whack. We can't do this. What are we doing? I won't say the artist's name, but we had to go back to the drawing board and figure it out because we believed, the passion ran deep. I told LA, And even Kenny said it in his acceptance speech. He was like, everybody that worked at LaFace, like, they wore the L on their chest. Like, you'd have thought it was their company. Like, we worked past 10 o'clock because we wanted to. Not because LA or Kenny was like, you got to stay. You can't leave, you know.
Right.
It was just a different kind of love and respect and passion, you know, and the drive was just different because LA was like, you know, everything has to be, you know, great. You know, an artist's career is based on the hit record. So if you don't have the hit record, you got to stay in the studio till you get it.
Facts. I can imagine that sort of competitiveness or that hunger comes from the fact that it was competitive.
For sure.
Everybody couldn't be in that room to stand on the table.
Exactly.
So you like, I'm standing on tables to make sure that my voice is heard.
Like it was a big deal. We felt like it was a privilege to be able to work at a label like that. And of course, you know, we had our issues like any other company, but for the most part, we operated the company like a family, right? So in families, you know, there are good days and bad days. You yell, you kick, you scream, but you love and respect one another. And we all had one goal and one mission, and that was just to be the best at what we did. Yeah. And I think it showed through our artists.
Absolutely.
And also the level of executives that we had that are still now, if you look at it, whether it's like a Kawan KP Prather, you know, who's doing extremely well right now, or, you know, Lisa Cambridge, and just I can keep going on and naming the executives that came from that team. The late Shakir Stewart, you know, who was at Hitco but spent a lot of time at LaFace. I mean, we produced stars not only from a music perspective, but from an executive perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to ask you actually you named some people who have been able to evolve their careers from executives or talent or whatever. And just even looking at your journey, you started or you went to school for radio, TV, and film, doing radio, and then to go into the music executive side to now your philanthropic work as an entrepreneur on that side. So I just want you to speak to evolving and really defining your purpose or redefining your purpose.
That's funny. I was telling someone not too long ago, I never knew, like back in the day when Oprah would be like, you know, walking your purpose, living your purpose. And I was like, what does that really mean? You know, and I was just so excited to be, you know, down and halfway living my dream. But, you know, life is about experiences. And you never know what direction it's going to take you in. You could have never paid me $1 million to think that I would be like out here advocating for mental health and wellness. Growing up, that's something we didn't really talk about a lot. But once my experiences happened I think what really kicked it off was having a family member that went through some traumatic experiences, and we later realized that they had a severe mental illness that it made me look at life differently. It made me look at people differently from a wellness perspective. And so I started just learning and trying to educate myself as much about it and learning from my sister. And so in 2014, my best friend took her own life, and that just really did a number on me. And so once I went through my own suicidal ideation in 2015 and you know, was able to get the help that I needed, I knew that life would just never be the same for me. Like, people come up to me and they say, oh, don't you miss music? And would you ever go back inside? And there were times, you know, where I was contemplating and debating. And, of course, the money isn't quite the same. But I can, 100% say, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And it feels good. It's not easy. Yes, it's still a struggle. Yes, there are ups and downs with it, but wow, being able to walk in my purpose, what a blessing and what an opportunity. And for even people that aren't spiritual out there, whether you believe in the universe or what it is, yes, the universe is allowing me to be in a space to do exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think being able to be vulnerable and transparent really makes me understand, this is where I'm supposed to be. Because normally most people,
it's a difficult thing to be
crying
vulnerable
on camera and letting people see your, weaknesses.
Yeah.
But I use that as a source of empowerment because to me, it's not that I'm weak. It's just that I'm vulnerable. But I would be weak if I didn't get the help that I needed. And so I'm able to, because I always feel like, who's ever following me, I got to show you the good and the bad. So I have to show you that I'm able to get help, right, and to keep pushing forward.
Now, when you talk about literally leaving, because we didn't talk about it, just chronologically, I would say. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, after LaFace was sold, you went on to work for multiple other labels, from Arista to Columbia to Universal Motown and so forth. But, like, and had great success with a lot of that talent, those artists. But, and this
Even
is,
got to work with Prince.
you got to work with Prince.
I did. I did the marketing for musicology in 2004.
That's amazing.
And I got to tour with him.
That's amazing.
And he's my favorite artist of all time. So you talk about, like, goosebumps.
Were you like, I mean, because I always wonder, you know, I'm a fan, like at the core. I feel like we're fans of music.
Of course.
So, but having to be, you know, interviewing or sitting next to somebody is always difficult. So, like, working with him, were you?
I fanned out the first time I met him. I was so mad at myself. I was like, damn, Shanti, what are you doing? So my boss, Donnie Einer at the time, I had told him if we get the Prince album, because I knew it was only going to be a 1-album deal, because Prince before that was very anti-label.
Right.
But for whatever reasons, he decided to do a traditional record deal. Well, I'm sure it wasn't traditional, but his version of a traditional record deal. And so I was like, he's my favorite artist. I'd love to work in some capacity. So one afternoon, Donnie called me up to his assistant called me up to his office, and it's like several levels up on the elevator. And I'm like, oh shit, like, what did I do? You know, because she's like, get up here now. And I'm thinking, what's going on? I'm stressing out. So I get there and the door's like cracked. And I was like, dang, do I peek in? So I like peeked in, and it was just Prince and Donnie in there. I had never met Prince before. And I froze. I just stood there, and then I guess he eventually saw that I was out there. So Donnie's in the background laughing, and Prince is like, are you coming in? And I was like, oh, yeah. And I had to, like, snap back into senior VP mode. I'm like, get your shit together, like. And so, yeah, and it was crazy. I walked in, and he got right to business. He was like, it's great to meet you. He was like, okay, so I have the video for musicology I'd like to play for you. I want to get your opinion. I was like, you want my opinion? So, yeah, I had to, like, you know, I was straddling between fan and executive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the first time he ever called my cell phone, I just freaked out, too.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I eventually got it together. But
Prince is coming through your phone. Like, what?
I was like,
For me?
sorry, what? He was like, hi, it's Prince. And I'm like, oh, shit. So anyway, yeah, that was a fun time in my life.
I'm sure. I'm absolutely happy that came out, because I didn't even recall. So I say that, though, you know, just all of these amazing moments of people and talent that you're able to work with, to deciding, you know what, I'm going to step away. Like, how much back and forth how much push and pull did it take for you to say, you know what, no?
2009 was a tough year for me. I think I was dealing with stress in the workplace. I didn't know how to really handle it. I wasn't seeing a therapist. I wasn't talking to anybody about it, so I was internalizing everything. And I tell the story now where, like, my assistant at the time, I would just come into my office and I would be like, don't call me unless Sylvia's calling. Like, I'm just having a tough day. And I would just isolate myself in my office. And the stress started manifesting itself from a physical perspective. I remember riding uptown one day, going to do some stuff in Harlem for work, and my entire right side went numb. And I was in my 30s, my early 30s, or mid to late 30s at the time. And
still not normal.
Right. And the doctor was like, you're too young to be dealing with this sort of stress. And I ended up being diagnosed with what's called cervical spinal stenosis. Again, most people when they're like 70 or 80 would deal with that. And so that's when it raised a red flag. And my sister was like, maybe it's time to come home. She was like, you don't really have a family there. The support system is not there. I know you're at the top of your game, but you need to come back. And then our mother developed Alzheimer's, and that was stressing me out because I felt like it's not fair that all of it's falling on my sister. And so I just made the tough decision, to walk away. And Sylvia Roan, shout out to her. She was very supportive because I thought I was going to have surgery and it's just a bunch of stuff. And so it was really difficult. And especially the first few years that I was back. I came back and, started doing some consulting for like Divine Stevens for Upfront Entertainment. Love Divine. He really is a man of his word because he was like, I got you. We'll figure it out. But I felt like, dang, all my other peers were still at the height of their game. And, what have I done? I walked away from everything. And there were some really tough times, but I made it through and I stuck it out, but I'd be lying if I said there weren't times where I questioned, what I did.
Your decision.
And why.
Right.
But
absolutely.
it was more so about family and
health.
And health. And I didn't even realize that it was about my mental health. But looking back on it now and just from, talking to therapists and friends and family, like it was definitely a wellness decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so many people in the entertainment business that don't acknowledge that side. So it's, what you're doing is obviously the work that you're supposed to do. So
Yeah.
I'm appreciative of that.
Thank you.
As well. Now tell us about Silence is Shame. It has its own day.
Yeah.
Congrats on that.
Thank you.
Its own podcast. I've been to several events here in the city. You have a team that works with the hip hop professional and all of the things. So I just want you to, for those who are listening to this podcast, we have a lot of younger listeners, aspiring everything. So I just want you to shed light on what you're doing with that.
Thank you. So Silence to Shame is, Silence to Shame Incorporated is a mental health and education and awareness organization. We exist to help erase stigma and normalize the conversation around communities, not only in America, but globally. It started, though, as a movement because initially, you mentioned the hip-hop professional. So I wrote a book about my career called The Hip-Hop Professional back in 2011. And I started doing a lot of community service work just in the Atlanta area just because I felt like I had a heart for service and I was being pushed more in that direction. And so I initially named my foundation the Hip Hop Professional Foundation. But what we noticed was that mental health was just a reoccurring thing with everything that we were doing. Even though I started talking about it, the foundation was really being pulled in that direction. And so we rebranded under the name Silence to Shame. And so we curate community conversations, which is really just another name for panel discussions, in various communities. We've done work with Jack and Jill of America Foundation, where we produce teen mental health forums and breakout sessions. We've done work with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, where we curated conversations around depression and HIV in the Black community. We've done work with the local state organization in Atlanta called DBHDD, and we went into faith communities to talk about, because, a lot of times, particularly in African-American culture, we're taught to just pray our problems away, especially, and we've heard that a lot around mental health and wellness. And then sometimes just some faith leaders don't even know how to talk to their congregation or communities about mental health. Sometimes it can be a difficult conversation. So we went in to try to help normalize the conversation in certain communities throughout Atlanta and the state of Georgia. So that was great. You mentioned the podcast. We are on iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud. We have almost 40 episodes up. And I'm excited to announce that we just received a small grant not a small grant. We received a grant, period. We're just grateful for the opportunity from the NFL Players Association.
Sweet.
And they're going to help us cover costs to keep the podcast going, as well as Self-Care Saturday events that we do, which are 1-hour wellness events in the Atlanta area. So we might do a yoga class or a Zumba or meditation, a cooking class, a journal release class.
Something therapeutic.
Exactly. And so those that we do twice a month. So we're doing that. But Silence to Shame has been just a blessing in my life. It's been an outlet for me to be open and share. And it's really humbling, the number of people that, shoot me a DM or will just reach out personally and say, Silence to Shame is changing my life. Or because of you or the organization, I'm going to therapy, I'm getting help, or my spouse is getting help. That feels so good to know that we're able to have an impact. And then there's a small organization in Kenya that's using the hashtag, an organization in Australia. And I've spoken in Ireland at a mental health conference. I spoke at a hip-hop conference that was a part of a dance music conference in Amsterdam called ADE Beats. So it's just been great to just share. And then because my background is from music, of course, I try to really push it into that culture. And so now you're seeing more artists and different people talk about it. But we started doing panel discussions called the Soundtrack of Mental Health. And so we partner with Music Cares, which is the foundation arm of the Grammys. And that's one thing I wish that I had known more about Music Cares. I always heard about the dinner that they would do during the Grammys. But quite honestly, if you weren't a chairman or CEO or top person in the company, you didn't really know a lot about Music Cares. And I didn't know that they have resources that are available for free to not only musicians, but for executives. If you really needed help and didn't have insurance and you were dealing with a substance abuse issues or a mental health crisis, you can go to Music Cares and get help. So any young musicians that are listening, or producers, writers, artists, just, Google Music Cares and know that that's a resource for you. Because another thing that I wish is that when artists get signed to labels, that they would get health care as a part of these recording contracts. So a lot of things from a human resource perspective, artists just don't even know about, and even executives. And so even within executives at your record companies and companies that you work for, know to go to HR if you need help. Like, don't be embarrassed about it. Don't be afraid about it. And so we've been able to do a lot in the music space. We've also done panels as a part of A3C. I've spoken at South by Southwest. And so really trying to take this conversation to the next level. I do think there are a lot of organizations, even Live Nation's doing something around wellness and touring now. So you're seeing it come to the forefront, but it's nice to know that Silence to Shame has been doing the work for the last 3 years. I've been fortunate enough to be featured on The Breakfast Club, and so Charlamagne the God has participated, on our panels before, and other artists like Carrie Hilson came out and spoke at one of our panels and opened up for the first time about her depression. David Banner has spoken at our panel. CeeLo, I just recently, last week or week before last, did a fireside chat with Royce 5'9", who has a new album coming out. But we talked very candidly about his addiction and his alcohol abuse and how he overcame that. And he's been sober since 2012. I'm so proud of him. And I've also talked to Big Crit about his issues with mental health and substance abuse. It's really dope to know that these artists think that Silence to Shame and my platform is a safe place and space. And so we want to be able to continue to provide that safe space, if you will, an opportunity for artists and creatives to be able to share.
Absolutely. I think it's important. I wanted to ask you, dealing with everything that you've dealt with, from loss to grieving, which is we know healing is a process every day.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that, through conversations, even this conversation, it's providing you with some sort of therapy. But how has the work been therapeutic for you, if it has, or do you find yourself, because I deep dive into work when I'm going through things. So is it really beneficial to you to do that, or has it proven to be therapeutic?
So the work, I think, definitely has proven to be therapeutic. One of the things that I knew after my sister passed away was, and it was literally 2 weeks before May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And ironically, she and I were about to do a panel together in Charlotte that we were planning. And I knew that I had to keep going. And by throwing myself back into work, it was a good thing. But I will say that if I had to do it all over again, I would have still, kind of pushed myself back to being able to work, but I would have also seen a therapist at the same time. And I didn't start seeing a grief counselor probably until 3 or 4 months after she passed away, and I would have done that a lot sooner as well. So anybody that's going through some sort of tragedy or loss, being able to work is a good thing, because you don't want to isolate yourself, but you need sometimes to talk to someone objectively.
Absolutely. I kind of not trying to harbor on grief and loss, but it's just that so many people, obviously we lost Kobe, and then Pop Smoke, everything.
And that's so sad.
So
sad. I just heard about
sudden.
That. He was only 20 years old.
He was only 20. Yeah, so just within the Black community specifically, I was having this conversation with a friend, one of my best friends, who dealt with loss prior to coming to college, her mom. So we talk about that, but she kind of shed light on the fact that, is it really being highlighted? Because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but of course I'm questioning, well, dang, is this something for, does the government, we have those conversations. But she brought to my attention, it's just a community thing. It's something that we see often because it is a factor within our community and the circumstances that we're provided with. So, the things, obviously Kobe's was more of a tragic death, and nobody expected, and Pop Smoke could have been, there are factors of social media, what we post online, what we highlight, or just
and I don't know a lot about what happened.
He was basically, it was a robbery. So,
okay.
So people speculate that it could have been someone he knew, et cetera. But my point is that, these things happen, and then they're highlighted. So I mean, I don't know Pop Smoke, but a lot of people were affected. I didn't know Kobe personally, but a lot of people were affected.
course.
So, like, having to address loss and grieving and you talked about it, like, while still moving forward in our lives. So that's why I wanted to.
And it's hard. Like, it's funny. My sister was actually featured on a podcast of Silence to Shame.
Where y'all were talking about.
We were talking about grief and loss. And so what she said was, the grief process is not a linear process. It's not the same. It's not a straight line. It looks more like a bunch of squiggly lines, like all over the place, because you just don't know how the next day is going to affect you. Also, I used the word earlier, triggers. Like, certain things can trigger that loss, because you might be working and having a good day, but then, like, a picture of my sister will just pop up on my timeline, or, how Facebook shares the memories and stuff, and it will just send me back into such a weird space and place. Or something might come on TV that will remind me of my sister, or things that we used to do. So, like, it's important that as we all deal with, grief and loss and tragedies, whether we knew the person or not, doesn't mean that we still can't experience grief. Because I think, Kobe's death, as well as Pop Smoke, as well as Mac Miller, as well as, Nipsey. I mean, we could keep going on and on. Had a profound effect on so many people, and you find yourself crying, both men and women and children, for a stranger. But you have to allow yourself, I tell people, allow yourself to heal and feel, allow yourself to cry. Tears can be therapeutic, right? It doesn't mean that you're weak, but you don't want to just kind of stay in those moments, but you got to go through the process. One of my friends and colleagues here in the Atlanta area had lost someone close to them, and, they found themselves crying so much. And I was like, that's okay. You got to get it out, because you just don't want to hold it in. And so anything I just will say to people, like, give yourself permission to feel, but at the same time, give yourself permission to heal. Don't be embarrassed about seeing a therapist if you have to, seeing a grief counselor, seeing a psychiatrist, because everybody's grief process is going to be different, but you got to go through it.
I agree.
And you never get over the loss. You just learn to find pathways forward, is what I like to say.
Absolutely. Now, we talked about the many accomplishments that you were able to make within the music industry and even beyond now with your nonprofit, but, or is it?
Yeah,
I'm
it
right.
is.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, nonprofit.
We are 501c3, so if y'all want to donate, it is fully tax deductible.
Because I'm just like, you got to be very specific with these like organizations. Right. But we didn't really talk about like some of the sacrifices that you were forced to make, i.e., you don't have children, you weren't married. Is that something that you look back in hindsight, and do you have any regrets on that? Like not starting a family, or not even, or is that something that you even wanted to begin with?
So I will say that, definitely early on, I was career woman, all in, 100% in. I never really, cared about, not that I didn't care about it. I just never, I would say, I think thought about it is probably a better expression. I never really thought about having a family, because I was doing what I love to do, and I love to travel, so I was getting to travel all the time and just was happy to go to work. And my sister married early, and so did my brother. And so I became like super aunt, so I have 6 nieces and nephews. And so I did regret traveling so much that I missed a lot of some of the activities that that the kids were involved in. And then I think once I started getting into my 30s, it was tough to date because my schedule was so hectic, and I did live out of a suitcase. So if I wanted to date a guy outside the industry, usually he wouldn't really understand my life. And at the time, I wasn't really willing to, put my work and job on the line, because and so there's some probably, I think, good points and bad points about that. But I don't necessarily have any real regrets. But it was a sacrifice for family time. I really felt like being, VP, senior VP, EVP, and working in such a fast-paced industry, there was a lot that I had to sacrifice in terms of family time. And so I regret a little bit of missing out on some of those special moments. And I think now that I'm older, I don't know that I regret not having kids. People tell me I have this maternal instinct, but I never thought I did. But I do look like one of my biggest accomplishments and something that I'm super proud of is being an aunt. Like I mentioned, to 6 nieces and nephews that I love all the same. Mm-hmm. And I'm very grateful for my siblings for allowing me to have that role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a lot of women and men probably who, put their career first, and then think about it after it's like, dang, I did miss that one birthday, that game, or whatever that was. And
I think it's a sacrifice in any career that you hold executive positions in. You're gonna miss a lot. You know, I was at NBA All-Star Weekend, and I got to meet a lady who is a CEO of one of the teams, and she said sometimes there are gonna be certain moments that you just can't miss, but then there are going to be moments, that you're going to miss, whether it's just something with your kid or your spouse. And that is a sacrifice, right, of holding those high positions. But I don't think that society should make women feel bad, right, for being leaders and for still trying to be, the head of the household and the mom. It just has to be right for your family, right, exactly. And for your own life and what works for you. Now I'm at a point where I'm glad that I'm kind of stationary and that I don't have to work so many late nights. But again, it's not that I'm working any less because it's hard running your own business. But, I love the space that I'm in now. And who knows? I mean, I don't know if marriage is in the cards, but, I would like to find a guy that is, spiritual like me, that likes to travel, and we share similar interests. And if he has kids, that's fine. But I think my time is up for being able to have
children. Yeah. How or have you been able to find balance when we're talking about juggling family, juggling
the
work?
Power of the word no.
Facts.
I used to be so afraid to tell people no, whether it was friends, family, or in the workplace. Girl, now no, I forgot who said it, but recently I heard somebody say no is a complete sentence.
It is.
And it is. And it's not that, you just can't be everything to everybody. And I've learned that. And more than anything, I know that life is short. Because I know that on April 17th, I was texting with my sister. Life was great. And I woke up 7 hours later and my sister was gone. Mm. And so there are just sometimes that, I physically can't do it. Mm-hmm. Or mentally, I'm just not there. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather tell somebody no, right? Reschedule, and make time. Now, the issue is, you tell somebody no, and if it's someone that's close to you, you got to also make time to make that up. Mm-hmm. But, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And some days, I just have to replenish my cup. Man, I just can't do it. And I don't feel bad about it.
That's real.
And you shouldn't either.
And you don't have to give an explanation.
So some days you might be like, Curtis, nope. Can't do it today, bro. We're going to have to make it another day. And it's okay.
It's okay.
Curtis now loves him, though.
I'm happy you finally say yes, though. How did you decide that you wanted to be on the podcast? Why? I know today was challenging, and usually it's scheduling things, but why was it important for you to come on this particular podcast?
Well, I'll be completely honest with you. I haven't really listened to a lot of the episodes, but he had been telling me about it, and I called him and asked him about some rates for his studio. And the one thing I'll say, Curtis is one of the most solid people that I know, not just in Atlanta, but in this industry. He's a man of his word. He's going to give it to you just like it is. But he's somebody that's always dependable. And so when he brought it up and started telling me about, the classes and the podcasts, I was like, of course, I want to be able to support him because he's just a genuinely good guy.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Anytime that anyone thinks enough of what I'm doing to want to be able to share, I'm humbled. And grateful for the airtime and the ability to be able to come and talk about it. So, you just make it happen.
Absolutely. Now, we're coming up on 25 years.
Oh, my God.
Or this is 25 years this year.
Is it?
July. Yeah.
Oh, that's so dope.
So, gotta ask you.
I remember when this studio first came around.
Exactly. I mean, we know, and people who listen to the podcast know, because all these stories connect. When you talk about KP was our very first episode. When you talked about our very first episode, he did a little dope DJ set and everything, girl. It was great.
Wow. How many years have y'all been taping the podcast?
4 or 5.
Fifth season.
Fifth season.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Wow.
And I got my start at the front desk. So, like, you know, everybody's stories connect, and just to see what comes
And
out of this.
evolving. That's so dope.
So how has Patchwork been a part of your career, your
Well, for
story?
one, I can't remember. I was here. I think I did an event with an artist a couple years ago, and it was surreal walking down the hallways looking at all the plaques. I was like, I worked that record. I worked that record. It's like the soundtrack of my life. I mean, most of the artists that I worked with, you know, had sat here and recorded in the studio. Like Patchwork is, you think of Atlanta, that's the first studio that comes to mind, you know. Patchwork and Tree Sound. Shout out to Molly. Like, those are the two staples, you know, in this community.
Yeah.
And now, of course, you know, with Drama and those guys. But, like, Patchwork, like, started it. You know what I'm saying? This is, like, the essence of music in Atlanta.
Yeah. I'm happy you said that. I just had to ask because I'm like, I know you remember the first building.
Oh, exactly. Running up and down the halls, late nights. Absolutely.
We didn't even get into the fact that you're author of, is it 3 books?
So I'm the author of 2 books and then 3 pocket guides, like these little mini guides.
Gotcha.
Like, one is the 1, 2, 3s of networking, the 1, 2, 3s of entrepreneurship, and the 1, 2, 3s of self-publishing the book. And it's just like 30 tips on these things. And I'll be honest with you, the last 5 years have just been a lot of ups and downs, but I'm finally redoing my website so that, like, all of my books will become available. And I'm really trying to push my brand out there so that I can even bring back the hip hop professional, because the hip hop professional, the definition of that is someone who loves hip hop and gives back to the community, right? And just has a serious love for the culture in general. And so, and that also performs on the highest level, right? So you can be a college student and be a hip hop professional. You just like hip hop, but you do charity work, you give back. But more than anything, you've raised the bar on your level of professionalism and excellence. And so I want to be able to push these self-help books out there more. But again, I'm only one person. I'm just praying that God sends somebody in my life that can help me, you know, maneuver through all of that. I do say one of my flaws is sometimes relinquishing control and being able to delegate, because I'm so hands-on everything, but I know I can't do it all on my own. So trying to find a good intern out there that believes in what I believe in, and find somebody young that's passionate. So if anybody's listening and you're serious about your business and, you know, want some mentorship and maybe we can kind of
work together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And do some bartering. So,
well, I'm excited for what you have to come.
Thank
I'm
you.
excited to have listened and been a part of you releasing.
Thank you. And I love to talk. Like, one thing I just want to add before we go is I'm also a paid speaker. So I speak at colleges and at corporations. Like, I just finished speaking at Warner Brothers Music in Los Angeles.
How do you get into becoming a speaker?
Girl,
like, people reach out to you?
It is hustle mode.
Yeah.
I'm out there pushing myself. I put together a nice little deck, which is just like another word for the 3-page PDF, right? Of photos of me speaking at other corporations. And I call my colleagues and I push myself. So I'm like the Jamaican. I'm my own agent.
Well,
I'm a travel agent, you know, booking agent. I do it all.
We have a hustle background.
You know, a lot of speakers, there are such things called speaker bureaus, but they typically take you if you're a celebrity or if you've had a book that's been published by a large, you know, publishing house. I self-publish my books. And so none of the big agents really, you know,
reach out,
wanted to necessarily take me on as a client. And I was like, okay, whatever, I'll figure it out. So I just started reaching back in. And so now I've spoken at the NBA. I'm doing some work hopefully soon with Major League Baseball. And so I'm just going and pushing myself as a speaker myself. So
that's dope.
If
you need a speaker at your next engagement, make sure you hit up Shanti, because she's obviously out here doing the work that needs to be done.
Thank you.
Please tell them where, you know, they can find more information about all of the platforms that you do have.
Thank you. So our website is www.silencetheshame.com. You can purchase T-shirts. Our T-shirts are kind of a thing now, so we have a little shop on the website. You can also make a donation and just learn more about the programs that we offer. Also, you can follow us on Instagram at Silence the Shame, and on Facebook and Twitter, it's at Silence TH Shame, because the names were taken. If you want to follow me, you can follow me at Shanti Das 404, SHANTIDAS 404, and my website will be launching hopefully in a month, and it's shantidas.biz. Next time, hopefully, you and I can talk about just our travels and similarities because of our Indian and African American culture and background. And going to India for the first time 2 years ago changed my life, because it was the first time that I got to really forgive my dad for his suicide and taking his own life. Learning about the culture, learning about my family, it just brought a sense of peace that I never had about my father. And so one thing I'll just say to people is, traveling is good for the soul. Mm-hmm. And if you have some, folks out there or lineage that you're looking to learn more about, like, take those trips. Mm-hmm. Like, don't be afraid. It's a big old world out there. I know people that, especially in our culture and community, are afraid to leave the block. It's a bunch of blocks out there.
Plenty.
In other countries. Don't be afraid to travel.
And you'd be surprised how
Hip-hop
similar.
and music is universal.
Mm-hmm.
And you just don't know what kind of connections you'll make.
Absolutely. You'd be surprised how similar they are,
God.
Honestly. I'm happy you got that resolve. I definitely, we'll talk off the record about it, but I definitely got the piece that I needed.
Good for you.
Being able to see people that
really
look
happy.
like my dad and my uncle.
That's
and like
so
our
dope.
family.
Yeah, and I can't wait to go back.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. We can go back.
I know.
For sure.
Let's do it.
Well, make sure you guys stay tuned with everything that Shanti has going on. Silence to Shame.
Oh, and May 5th is National Silence to Shame Day.
Yes.
So we're going to be doing a big
too.
text-a-thon, and we want to get people involved, helping us to raise funds. So maybe, Curtis, we can do something special for May 5th and get your listeners involved.
Let's do it. Yeah, and Shanti Das has her own day, too. We didn't even talk about.
June 5th.
Yeah, shout out to that.
Thank you.
As always, you guys can find this podcast on social media at IDM Podcast, as well as myself, Sammy Approved, on all platforms. Thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Sonically superior.